Aging.
Daniel.
Otro.
Quizás hasta audífono.
E todas. Meu nome é Nájila Veloso, estou como
Good afternoon. My name is Nadia
Good
Veloso.
afternoon to everyone. My name is Nadia Veloso, and I am here as the coordinator of the FAO School Feeding Program. And we're here to talk about current challenges regarding school feeding and teaching opportunities.
Tradução simultânea ao inglês, português e espanhol, aqui na plataforma Zoom, assim que podem acionar as salas, e também a los que estão nos assistindo por la plataforma YouTube, UN, FAO, Twitter de la Cooperación Brasil FAO, também estamos retransmitindo em espanhol e em inglês. Há dois momentos muito importantes.
There are two key moments for this event. The first one is an opportunity to have dialogue between the various representatives, and Colombia will refer to some reflections surrounding school feeding alternatives and what we can offer our students during the post-pandemic period. And we know that this is a moment of transition, that some students are in person, some are transitioning, some are hybrid, some are still online. We will talk about good practices. We will hear from St. Lucia from the Caribbean region and their experience, and the Brazilian experience as well. They are referring to the challenges that they face today, but in a more concrete fashion. Now, following these two presentations, we will engage in a dialogue. So please be sure that you submit your questions via chat, and be sure to state your name and the country you represent. Now, this is a virtual experience, but it's yet another experience by the network of the school feeding program. This is an experience spearheaded by Brazil and the National Education Foundation. And this is also supported by FAO and the School Feeding Consolidation Program for Latin America and the Caribbean. Now, this network provides it represents a response by the Brazilian government, a way to respond to the current and future challenges regarding some of the issues we're all facing during the pandemic and post-pandemic. We are here to foster dialogue opportunities between countries, such as we are doing today. And the purpose is to provide support to everyone with regard to drafting and implementing school feeding programs in order to ensure that students are exercising their human right to have quality feeding, quality meals at every point in time. Now, moreover, several initiatives have been rolled out to train these countries and to boost their school feeding programs. So we are all here today because we are truly interested in ensuring the human right to healthy and quality meals for our children, school children. Almost all the countries have been able to do so. And we know that all of us here are very curious and learning about the St. Lucia, Colombian, Brazilian, Uruguayan experience. So we are here to learn from them. Now, let us move on with the panel of speakers who will provide us with their introductory remarks. Paola Papiere will begin. She is an analyst from ABC, the Brazilian Cooperation Agency from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And then we have the national coordinator of the National School Feeding Program and the Fund for Development, Education Development, is Carolina. And then we have Mr. Rios, who will represent FAO as a nutrition officer providing support from the sub-region. So Ms. Paula, followed by Carolina, and then the FAO official will take the floor in that order. Thank you for joining us here today.
Boa tarde a todos e a todas. É com muita
Good
satisfação
afternoon to all. It's with great satisfaction that we participate in this second meeting on sustainable school feeding networks on the theme, the current challenges of school feeding and the different modalities within the framework of the sustainable school feeding programs in Latin America and the Caribbean. I'd like to salute the participants of this session Mrs. Karine Santos, General Coordinator of the National Program for School Feeding of the National Fund for Development of Education, and Mr. Israel Rios, the official officer of the FAO programs. I'd like to salute especially the representatives of the governments of Colombia, Paraguay, Santa Lucia, and Brazil, and as well as the moderators and the representation of CARICOM, who will contribute to the program today. As you all know, the Brazilian Cooperation Agency under the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Brazil, in the condition of central body of the Brazilian system for international cooperations, has the main focus to develop capacities and support the challenges of each partnered countries in their respective development process. The partnership with FAO in trilateral South-South cooperation has now completed more than 12 years, covering various technical areas. The issue of school feeding in Latin America and the Caribbean is one of these important themes, and it is considerably strengthened in our cooperation. In this partnership, we recognize the valuable and permanent contribution of FNDE as the Brazilian cooperating and financing institution, as well as FAO as an important agency articulating and promoting this important discussion in the region. The theme proposed today is of fundamental importance in view of the new paradigm imposed on us by the COVID-19 pandemic. In this new scenario, the virtual model of education, the gradual return of the face-to-face model, and the coexistence of both are a reality. In this scenario, the perspective of school feeding needs to be thought and rethought in an agile way so that necessary adaptations can be made efficiently and in a timely manner in the established school feeding programs. In this sense, there is nothing better than having effective spaces for exchange, such as this platform, within the framework of the Sustainable School Feeding Network, created in 2018 under this trilateral South-South cooperation project, with the important purpose of providing a space for exchange between the countries of the region, with a view to strengthening school feeding programs, helping us to collectively face the challenges encountered. Thank you to all. We've now been working for so long in this very special program, and it's a pleasure for me to take part on this platform that enables us to work in a more effective way on an international arena. I'd like to thank also the director of Israel, who is always part of this collective work between the Caribbean and the Americas. I'd like to thank the participants of the government who are here today and participating in this dialogue, and who will talk about this true need, that is how to change the learning modalities in the face of the COVID pandemic that we are still unfortunately going through. We've gone through it through the year 2020 and still working on it this year, 2021. So this is a topic that is very important for us to see the strategies to adopt for a better return to school of our pupils and students. As you know, the best environment is school for our students and pupils. And so we have to see all the possibilities so that the school feeding programs may continue in these spaces, in these schools. Thank you to all the representatives, to the colleagues that are watching us. The FDE is the implementer of the school feeding program in Brazil. Thank you very much. Israel.
Thank you, Nadia. Thank you to the other colleagues, Paula Barbieri and Karine Santos from the FNDE. We are very pleased here at FAO to bring together the technical component and other components for such a valuable cause, which is ensuring the school feeding program for thousands of children throughout our region. We are here to ensure the human rights are upheld through the school feeding program and other areas, and to consolidate the public purchasing programs of food in the region as well. So our region has already begun making changes at the school feeding policy level. This corresponds to an urgent need, and this is one of the challenges we face with regard to back to school post-pandemic. And we know that there are several alternatives out there, and we have to make use of the various lessons learned, because this can truly allow us to bring about significant changes and provide meals to the children in the school setting. Now, during the pandemic, we have seen a significant increase in the food insecurity and hunger indicators, and this clearly has had an impact on the number of individuals who are facing hunger, in keeping with the most recent UN report. Emphasis has, they've underscored that 800,000 individuals are unable to gain access to food. In Latin America, the situation is just as bad. Thousands of individuals have been reclassified as facing hunger. And food insecurity has truly impacted millions of individuals, not just in Latin America and the Caribbean, but elsewhere. Close to 60,000 individuals, 60 million individuals are facing a severe critical situation. So it is crucial for us to bring the school feeding programs back on board during the post-pandemic back to school period. We need to ensure that the children have a healthy, nutritious meal. And we are pleased to take part in this workshop, and I would like to greet the various colleagues from CARICOM and from Latin America present here today, and let's take the best advantage possible of this opportunity and glean additional lessons from how we can do a better job once we are in person again on the floor, on the ground in the schools. So thank you for that. It's quite a pleasure for us to have 3 representatives here from these organizations. This is yet another example of their true commitment to school feeding programs. We can change individuals' lives. We can actually change our own lives, because we have spent days and nights devoting our time to this cause. Thank you so much. I wanted to mention that now we will begin the dialogue. If you have questions, be sure to post your questions via the platform you're using. Please be sure to state your name and the country you are representing. And if we are unable to answer all of your questions because of time constraints or what have you, we will post these questions on our website, the platform's website, and we will answer your questions there as well. Very well, then let's move on with the second section of the events this afternoon. I would like to introduce Reina Osorio, who is a specialist in food and nutrition education strategies at FAO El Salvador. She will she will actually be the moderator of this dialogue regarding challenges related to school feeding programs, trying to address the different education modalities. Thank you, Nadia. Good afternoon, dear colleagues and everyone else who is joining us here at this event. It's quite a pleasure for me to take part in this meeting, and I would like to thank each and every one of the panelists joining us here today. Thank you for sharing your valuable experiences with us from within your national realm. As Najla mentioned, this dialogue will refer to the various challenges we face in terms of school feeding programs in the different education modalities. And we have several pending challenges, of course, and we are seeking solutions to best provide school meals to boys and girls, regardless of the type of education they are receiving and where they are, whether they are in person, for example, or remote education, online, that is, or hybrid. I would also like to take advantage of this moment to introduce you to the colleagues who will be joining us in this panel discussion. We have colleagues from Brazil, Colombia, and Paraguay. On behalf of the Brazilian experience, we have Karina Santos, who's the national coordinator of the school feeding program in Brazil, as Nadia mentioned. And then from Colombia, we are joined by Juan Carlos Martinez Martin, the General Director of the Special School Feeding Administrative Unit. And from Paraguay, we have Andrea Milena, who is the Director of the National School Feeding Program in Paraguay. Thank you to all three of you for joining us. We are very excited to learn about your experiences and the various lessons that we can glean from those. Moreover, we know that your remarks will be helpful and we will hear your practical experiences. I'm sure you will be very realistic and you will speak from your own experience. So also I would like to request that you be sure to speak slowly enough, bearing in mind that we have simultaneous interpreters working with us. So please bear that in mind so we can fully understand your message. Each speaker has been allotted a specific period of time. Please be sure to respect that. And also activate your microphone only when you are about to take the floor. Let us begin with the first question that we will address here during this first round of dialogue. Let me begin with Karine. I would like for you to refer to what is currently going on in your country at educational establishments, at the schools. Are they reopening? How's that process been carried out? And what is the most common mode? Is it in person, virtual, or hybrid? So that's the first question for all three of you. Karine, you have 2 minutes. Go ahead.
In Brazil, we firstly had to reorganize the school agenda and schedule in terms of the school days and also the feeding periods for the children. And so we had to reorganize all the teaching and learning activities. It could be done in person or from home, virtually. And then we asked all the states and municipalities about which schools were opened or not. But But because most of the schools were in the municipalities, and the municipalities decided to close the schools, most of the schools were closed. So the social distancing was followed, and the in-person school hours went back after a few months. And then we had a hybrid system whereby some stayed at home while the others went to school. So there was a flexibilization of the legislation for this to be possible, whereby students, when they are at school, have access to a meal, and when they have remote learning classes, they receive kits of food at home. This was made possible through the legislation and the laws that were put into place, because our expertise is to offer food within the school premises. But because of the pandemics, we flexibilized the law so as to be able to prepare food kits and have the parents receive those food kits at school for their children to eat them at home. So we also took into account the different types of foods they eat depending on the region in the Brazil. So generally speaking, public schools are going back to school, are opening back the schools in the municipalities, but they're doing that in a hybrid way. So those who are at school receive a meal, and those who are at home receive a kit.
Okay, thank you, Karine, for this answer that clarified what we were asking you. So now we are going to go straight to, at the end, we'll go for a summary. So we would like to now offer the floor to Juan Carlos Martinez from Colombia, so he can comment in the case of his country, what has been this scenario and what modality they are adopting in their educational establishment. Go ahead. Thank you, Reina, and hello, everybody at FAO and our Brazilian friends and all the members of the discussion panel. Since last year, the Ministry of Education came up with a guideline to become ready. We were not able to finish the plans last year. It's clearly UNICEF says, and in that sense, we had to start preparing, not only preparing pedagogic aspects, but all the supplementary programs, such as school feeding programs that started last year, a set of indications, because this program is decentralized. It also handles, it's handled by private operators, so that all contracts had the obligation of considering those two ways of operating, both at the establishment level or the school level and at homes, in order to finally do that gradual transition. Today, after a first semester when the instruction was to work alternatively, so start working with small groups and see how they had evolved into get the schools ready and see how the biosafety measures operated. And by the end of the year, the decision was made, coming from the Ministry of Healthcare, to request the back to school, to face-to-face school attendance, considering the significant impacts of COVID on children, gradual, progressive, and last week there was a report from the Ministry of Education saying that 80% of the schools are operating and 66% of children are attending school. But as Karine said, there are places where, because of number of people allowable and in order to keep social distancing in the classrooms, schools establish certain shifts for classes to attend. That is the exercise. The premise is key. It needs to support the reality. It cannot be thought separately. It needs to go following the reality of children. And this has been what we have done. Another challenge to be able to generate necessary flexibility to support that gradual process and specific project process as well, because not all regions are operating at 100%. There are certain peculiarities by municipality, by school, or by specific children, but with the clear principle of always making decisions based on what is good for the children. Thank you, Juan Carlos, for your remarks. It is really interesting to see that similarity or what you were telling us, or Karine was telling us. Thank you very much. And so we are, likewise, we are going to offer the floor to Milena, so that from her own perspective, the perspective of her country, Paraguay, so she can tell us what has been, how this modality has operated. Go ahead, Milena. Good afternoon, everyone, dear colleagues, and those of you attending this webinar. In Paraguay, we have a safe protocol to go back to school. And in this protocol, we have the very clear mechanisms that can guarantee this safe back to school of students in this second half of 2021, where mainly the priority is the well-being and the health of all the members of the educational community. We also have pedagogic and socio-emotional support advisory according to the different local realities and the requirements that are identified. We also have fundamental principles based on the experiences observed in other countries, and also during the first half of 2021 in our country. And also we have general guidelines that are the basis of the organizational structure and the operating processes to go back to face-to-face classroom attendance in Paraguay. This was voluntary and gradual because it depends on the authorization of the parents for their children to attend schools physically. And we have three modes: a remote one, a semi-remote, and the face-to-face mode. As part of the face-to-face mode, once again, we have two sub-modes, which is the bubble, or what we call the stable groups, as we call them. They have a fixed number of students who must observe minimum distance, 1.5 to 2 meters between them, and they share common spaces, either in the classroom or in different workshops and in the school yard. And also we have the cuadrilla or crew. That is a set of these bubble groups or groups of students that actually attend school at the same time, within the same time slot. And those are defined according to, or by weeks, or by month, etc., etc. So in terms of school feeding programs in Paraguay, we are delivering meals that contain non-perishables. These foods are decentralized according to different municipalities that are the food is being offered to students in Paraguay. Thank you, Milena. We have taken note of your experience, and there are some similarities compared to the other comments that we heard. Maybe we'll take some notes for last, but now that we have heard about your experience, we'd like to go to the next round of questions in order to keep going. According to these different modes of operation that you've been combining and using in your countries, please tell us what have been the main challenges that you have identified in this back to school process, depending on the types of modes of attendance that you've described. For this, we will have 3 minutes so you can become organized. So you can organize your thoughts. And in the same order, I will offer the floor to Karine first, so that we can start with Brazil again. Go ahead.
So I'll speak a bit of our challenges with regards the hybrid system. And to organize my line of thought, I put it in 2 pillars, separated in 2 pillars. Firstly, the funding for this, because in the face of the hybrid modalities, the municipality or the state needed to guarantee the offer within the schools and also the distribution of food kits at homes for the homes. And to ensure those 2 distributions, they would need to spend more and have more expenditure, and in order to make sure that they could distribute the food kits and the meals. So the idea was to transfer the funding from the federal level to the state level and then the municipalities. And we do that within 10 installments along the year. So we transferred 2 more installments because of the further expense that we had with this hybrid system on within the school network in Brazil. Besides this increase in funding, which was a challenge for us, another aspect that needs highlighting is related to the health of these students and pupils. So we started a new program that was funding directly at school, that was funding to make sure that all schools had the hygiene kits to sanitize the canteen, the classrooms, to offer the alcohol in gel, hand sanitizers, and to make sure that the spaces were ventilated and the distance was kept, the use of gloves when doing the handling of the food and handing over the kits, to make sure that everything was done according to protocols. And within this aspect of health, we also produced a protocol for the return to schools, specifically focused on school feeding. So to know the practices, the habits to adopt, and the food safety aspects. So we worked on the entire chain of supply for the school feeding program. We're talking of the sanitization of utensils, the equipment, the facilities, how to sanitize all these spaces, how to sanitize the food, the part of the transport, the reception areas, and how to store the food, and also how to handle the food when in contact with the children or when preparing the food kits. So all the procedures were specified in the protocol. Besides this, we had a protocol for the return to schools that was done together with the Ministry of Education, which is a wide in scope a protocol that is to be followed during the entire period at school, not only during the feeding period, but also during the classes, so as to ensure all the funding for the school feeding program and the part related to health and in this process of returning to school. So these were the main two challenges we faced.
De acuerdo, muchas gracias, Karine, también por compartirnos esa experiencia también desde Brasil. Vemos efectivamente que la prevención, ¿verdad? Todo este tema que ustedes han tomado en cuenta para poder garantizar que esos espacios estén, ¿verdad?, en condiciones adecuadas para recibir a los niños, niñas y adolescentes.
Situations to receive boys, girls, and teenagers has been fundamental through the protocol that you've just discussed. Thank you. And we'll go on now to, well, same question. And now we offer the floor to our colleague Juan Carlos from Colombia, so that you can comment based on your experience that you've had. What were those challenges in these different modes of going back to school? Juan Carlos.
Thank you for that, Reina. Let me begin. Unfortunately, the speaker's connection is breaking up. The speaker's connection is not stable. In any event, everyone has had to make adjustments during this transitional period, and we need to ensure that all the safety measures are in place. And so we have worked quite intensely with the various resources in order to make sure that everything was ready during the first half of the year. Of course, that was not successful everywhere, but nonetheless, in some places, it has been successful. So let me continue to refer to this discussion, other aspects, by pointing out the main challenge, which is overcoming fear and fake information that we see throughout the social media outlets. And this is clearly an issue that we all face when working with very socially sensitive issues. Everyone wants to dig their heels in and adopt a position. And obviously, health and education are often addressed from different perspectives, but they're intrinsically linked. And so we need to figure out how we can ensure that both rights are observed and enjoyed, and that we have enough good education and information to do so. Now, we have seen that the social pressure clearly is being exerted on these sectors to get the children back in the classroom. And we know that the non-in-person educational experiences for young children has been challenging. Once again, the speaker's connection is unstable.
Realmente de esos países, y lo dicen tienen claro que no lograron los mismos
We
avances.
know that the success and the progress has not been the same offline, and that's why we need to get back to in-person classes as quickly as possible and make sure that the enabling conditions are there, and so that we can ensure the right to education and the right to nutrition as well, the right to a good meal. Now, I also would like to refer to how these processes, we know that they're gradual. And if you jump right into it and open a school, that school or that establishment, let's assume it has 1,000 students, how many do you think will actually show up the first week, and then the second week, and then the third week? We can secure computers for the classrooms, but we do not have a crystal ball, so we really do not know how many children will show up, and it's difficult. This makes it difficult to plan school feeding programs, and so we need to have the ability to make changes along the way as we go along week by week, and we have to make sure that we are working with food products that will not perish and will not be affected, and so we need to do this gradually and allow the school to gear up, and that is how we will be able to manage this. It hasn't been easy, and in the end, it truly is based on everyone's willingness to do so, and that we're all working with the same information, the same principles. We all need to put forth our best effort. We talked about this with Chile and Peru back early on, when we were shipping out school feeding programs, school meals to the individual students' homes. And now we have a new challenge, which is going back to school, something that we have been doing for decades. We've always faced crises along the way, fires, earthquakes, floods, etc. But still, we have been able to meet the needs of students in schools facing crises. When a school has been shut down, we've been able to send the children elsewhere. So a lot of we have had to dig into the toolbox of past lessons learned and apply these to the new context. That is my message for you. I always say that children shouldn't have to adapt to the bureaucratic decisions, the other way around. We need to adapt to their needs. Thank you for that, Juan Carlos. Thank you for your remarks. Very interesting perspective. It's interesting to see how you have addressed the need to have flexible procedures and to do things differently. Thank you for that. That's one of the key messages. This clearly adds to the discussion we're having today. I would now like to give the floor to Milena, Andrea Milena, to refer to the Paraguayan experience and the challenges that you have faced along the way, what you have identified with regard to back to school experience, regardless of the mode. Well, I can break these challenges into three areas. The first is related to the health challenges. Obviously, we know that I think most of the countries have had to face going back to the in-person experience and ensuring that we are providing quality education without jeopardizing the health of the students and others. We do not want to jeopardize health. And then, paradoxically speaking, we are trying to seek a rapid mechanism that would allow to assess the students' learning experience during 2020 and part of 2021 while they have been online. That is yet another challenge. And of course, we need to figure out how to gain back everything that we have lost over the year and a half. We know that the students, even though they have studied online, there have been losses with regard to the learning process. Also, we simply cannot avoid the significant poverty that we have faced in our country because many companies have shut their doors. A lot of people have been unemployed, and many students who were attending private schools have moved into the public school sector. Now that would obviously involve the need to have more investments in education and in school feeding programs as well. This entails more efforts and investments in, because we have to provide school meals to the new public school students who were in the private system in the past. And so we are working on guaranteeing that right to education. And as my colleague said, all the other rights that are intrinsically intertwined, the right to education, the right to health, the right to nutrition, for example. Thank you, Milena, for sharing your experience with us. You have also touched upon another key aspect, which is related to the teaching experience, the evaluation process. We also need to adapt this once again when moving into the different educational modes. Very well, then let's move forward with the next round of questions. Same order of speakers. Each individual has 3 minutes. Now, we have heard from all 3 of you, and now we would like for you to point out specific lessons learned that you would like to promote and to perhaps replicate in other countries. That is the question. Let us now begin with Karine.
Well, I will talk about our lesson learned in a sort of a sequences. The first of these was the speed in decision making. We need to be fast in a totally new setting, in a difficult setting that we had not foreseen. The second point was adaptation of policies. Policies are made in order to respond to the needs of the citizens. So when we're talking about the school feeding programs, we're talking about students. So we need to be fast, we need to adjust the policies, and we had to consider who we're going to receive these policies, the beneficiaries of this policy, what we're going to ensure with this policy. In our case, was to ensure the access to food and the articulation in the execution. We need to adjust the policies and we need to coordinate in order for this execution to take place in a differentiated way. Because so in order for this to be executed in a good way, even though this scenario is not ideal. In the face of pandemics, we need to readjust the policies. We need to take the decision of changing the legislation and distribute the food kits, even with the schools closed. And all of this in a setting of difficulties in social distancing. We need to be, if we were not too fast and agile, we will not be able to act on a timely fashion to respond to the needs of our kids. So the school feeding program is a state policy, and we did all that we could in order to maintain the execution of this policy. So I remember the first network of schools that suspended classes was here in Brasilia on the 13th of March of 2020. So I know this very well because my kids go to school, to the public school here. So in less than 30 days, in the beginning of the pandemics, we already had a change into the legislation of the school feeding programs with a new law, with a new implementation in order to ensure that our students would have access to the food, to the meals, even though the classes were suspended in the public schools, in the schools of the public network, even though the schools were closed. So we need to be fast in terms of decision make. We need to readjust the policies and we need to have a very well coordinated execution.
Gracias, Karine, por tu
Thank you,
intervención.
Karine, for your remarks. You've highlighted very important elements in terms of how we are going to address that public policy and apply it to the different territories according to the different conditions for boys, girls, and teenagers. That articulation that starts at the national level and then the specific territories. Now we'll go straight to Juan Carlos, so that you can give us some detail about those elements that you can discuss, those lessons learned in this back to school experience that you are. Thank you. We are forced to think that it's not enough with we need to consider all related aspects of the program, because if we do not have a holistic approach to the different impacts, maybe poor decisions are made. As I said before, health and education should not be in conflict, nor employment and health. In what during lockdown, a few things happened. We changed. The speaker audio quality is very poor. We will resume the interpreting when the conditions are better.
Por tanto, generamos vulnerables. Y además, que buena parte de las personas que trabajaban en esa manipulación, pues dejaron de ser necesarios porque bastaban.
No. So we also affected families and women who did not have any more opportunities. Those are realities and we need to look at them. So it's not only having or focusing on a specific aspect or whether the impacts of a certain measure are enough, but we should look at many other factors and how we are able to gradually recover and safely recover that reality that guarantees that everyone has the right to life, not only health or education, also employment and the opportunity to. Second, unfortunately, when these things happen, we don't listen to children. It's been very pleasant to roam around the country, and there are some other colleagues that are doing the same job that I do. When you children do not, when you ask them, that's the only guarantee when they go to school, when they actually can have a meal. But when you discuss with principals, you find the same situation. Some principals, we've interviewed some of them, school in a rural area. When I said that it was impossible to reach the same level of progress.
Al final me dio la palabra y corrigió, dijo, no estoy de acuerdo con usted. No es cierto que hayan avanzado menos, retrocedieron. Estoy asustada. Los tengo en posición atrás de cuando se fueron en marzo del año pasado.
They are in a worse condition compared to March last year because these areas, rural areas, did not have enough opportunities. And it's clear that this COVID created an even bigger issue regarding social gap between those who had conditions to go through that process and those who didn't. That is a lesson as well, according to what Karina says, to rethink our policies and to understand that we must be able to make them more flexible. But the interests of all the other actors are secondary. The fundamental interest is the child, his or her development, their conditions, their learning. So when you are clear about that,
las decisiones crucifican por haber creado el PA en casa. Hoy todo el mundo dice que fue la mejor decisión. Hoy
everybody says that that was the same decision. Maybe today, many are criticizing this, but what's important is that when we look at it with perspective, we'll see that the decision was the best one. Thank you, Juan Carlos. And in fact, that agrees with some of the things that Karine mentioned. I just want to go back to something that you highlight in your comments, which is always to think of the ultimate interest of boys, girls, and teenagers. That is part of a human rights approach as well. So that is a lesson learned for everyone. So we will take note of that. Thank you very much. So now I'll offer the floor to Milena. So the same way she can comment from the point of view of Paraguay, what would you highlight as lessons learned or improvements that you achieved? Milena, the floor is yours. Thank you. Really, I would highlight as the fact that the state found an efficient response mechanism in terms of providing access to school feeding programs to meet the delivery of these school meals, because the school feeding program in Paraguay is a state policy, it's a public policy, just like in many other countries. Although it is true that our country is a country with significant levels of poverty, face-to-face education is not the same as remote education. But in terms of right to food, the country has found immediate response in order to guarantee that right. Secondly, that right that was provided as a food kit or a meal also helped these students. However, what we have learned is that there's a deficit in this delivery of meals, which was not coupled with nutritional education actions, which is the aim of this school feeding program, but mostly was to deliver food with a different type of approach that has been evolving with this new school feeding act. We believe with this type of meals, we went back to, because the families that have received this type of food, well, this created a little bit of a dependence. So these families, the families are expecting for these programs to extend now in time. But we know that this type of food should not be a benefit to reach only the schools, but a different entity should distribute this benefit to these vulnerable families and go back to fresh meals so that the main beneficiaries are the students. So that has been another lesson learned in the whole process. Thank you, Milena. We would like to thank each one of you for your participation. For the benefit of time, we know that you didn't have much time, but we wanted to use one last time for you so you can highlight something that you think it's pending. Some final thoughts that you'd like to give us. For that, we have 1 minute each. So, Karine, one last thought.
Okay, I will be very short. What I would like to inform of the joy, the happiness of being with the colleagues from other countries. And I understand that all of us here are in the struggle, in the search for the same rights, education, health, food. And it's very comforting to know that there's all these people working with this. And lastly, I would like to say that I understand the school feeding requires intersectionality and shared responsibilities, collective work. So it's very comforting to know that the work that we have been carrying out in the Latin America and Caribbean of building collectively concepts and objectives regarding school feeding. When I hear our colleagues Juan and Milena, we notice that we are always walking together on the same path. So I would just like to set the record and like to congratulate you for your effort. And I'd like to mention once more of the joy that I feel that we are doing the best for our students.
Thank you for that, Karine. Let us quickly now give the floor to Juan Carlos so that he can provide us with some final remarks. Go ahead, Juan Carlos. Thank you. This, yes, has been a very pleasant experience. Thank you so much. It's been nice to hear from Milena and Karine, and everyone has clearly mentioned how we have taken on such a lofty challenge. Now, hopefully we won't have a second pandemic and we'll have to repeat this experience again in our lives. And hopefully the lessons learned will be applicable to more minor experiences and something not as horrendous as this. I wouldn't want to go through this a second time in my life. Now, Milena also referred to how if we did have to do this again, that would be a challenge. We do not have all the answers. And clearly this results in frustration if you do not have the capacity to, the institutional capacity to coordinate with the various bodies to meet the needs. That is clearly an issue. But anyhow, we were forced. COVID forced our hand and made it necessary for us to do so. And it really improved our perspective and our vision. Now we understand that we have more capacity than we thought we did, and we've developed capacity, and we have done all of this to ensure the free exercise of rights. So thank you once again to FAO. Thank you to everyone else who's working behind the scenes for all of this. So thank you. Thank you, Juan Carlos, for your remarks. Now let us hear from Milena for some final remarks based on your country's experience. Go ahead. Thank you, Maria. It has been such a pleasure to be here this afternoon with Juan Carlos and Karine and the other colleagues. I'm very pleased to share my experience with you and to hear from the other countries' experiences, it's clear that we have some common ground and we can learn from the other countries' experiences and contribute our own. As far as our experience in Paraguay, we have seen that the longer the students are in the classroom, clearly we are able to identify that there are more needs to have fresh food, and all of our school feeding programs also include healthy habits training and nutritional training. And we have been working in that realm as well. So thank you once again for allowing me to speak here this afternoon. Thank you, Milena. I also wanted to thank all three of you for joining us here today and sharing your experiences with us, Karine, Juan Carlos, and Milena. Thank you so much for your valuable contributions. Let me just pick up on something you mentioned. We must not forget that part of the goal of school feeding programs is to build these healthy eating habits. So let us not lose that from sight. And thank you for bringing that up. Obviously, we face a myriad of various challenges, and this will be dependent on the national context and reality, and they're all different. But nonetheless, everything that we have heard from you today is helpful. Now, prior to giving the floor back to Nadja, I just wanted to remind us all of some key aspects you mentioned. The human rights of boys, girls, and adolescents, let's not lose sight of that. You have also largely referred to the need to be flexible and to adapt to changing context. And let's not generalize, but let's focus on the specificities of each school, each establishment, each municipality. That is essential. And of course, coordination, articulation, you all referred to that as a key element. Various government bodies are involved in this effort. We're all trying to come up with effective solutions, and so we must coordinate our actions. So thank you, and let me give the floor back to Nadja to continue with the activities. Thank you. Nadja.
Se me mutaram, eu não lo vi. Gracias.
I was muted. I apologize. I didn't know that. Thank you so much, Reina, for your brilliant work as moderator. Thank you to the three speakers for your extremely valuable contributions. It is essential to study the challenges and learn from the lessons we have all had. I truly enjoy seeing these changes and the transition. Now, we have been meeting throughout the entire pandemic, and it's interesting to see our evolution. I think it's much easier now to reflect upon what we have learned and what we have experienced, and we have greater clarity now. Thank you. Now, allow me to invite my dear friend Franson, who is an FAO officer. He will Jean Franson will refer to some good practices. He's a food security officer in FAO from the SLC region. And he will moderate this panel because this panel will try to refer to the evidence showing that it is possible to take on the wealth of challenges. So you have limited time, 5 minutes each, and we will hear from St. Lucia and Brazil. Thank you for your support here, Jean Franson. Thank you. Good afternoon to all of you, ladies and gentlemen.
Just a second. I had my que tenía la interpretación y se me está.
I was listening to the Spanish channel, unfortunately. So one moment, just let me reconfigure this.
Disculpa, es que yo tenía la
Good afternoon. I apologize. I was tuning into the Spanish interpretation, and so I was hearing that through this channel. Anyhow, good afternoon.
Caribbeans participating in this webinar today. Mi nombre es Franzen Jean.
My name is Jean Franzen. I am a food security officer for the Caribbean region. It's an enormous pleasure to be here with you today and to moderate this section of our afternoon activities. As Naja mentioned, we have 25 minutes for this section, and we will try to abide by that time allotment. As already mentioned, this is an opportunity for us to follow up on the reflections by Brazil, Colombia, and Paraguay. And we will also hear from St. Lucia and Brazil. Both of them have PowerPoint presentations, and they will refer to several different aspects, either mentioned by Karine, Juan Carlos, or Milena, and they will also delve deeper into the various methods and modes that have been rolled out to continue serving the beneficiaries of the school feeding programs. And we will also refer to the various challenges pinpointed by the three countries and what we will have to do to rise to the occasion. We will also reflect upon the various lessons learned that they have pointed out. Let me begin this panel experience by inviting Ms. Miriam Henville to the virtual floor. She is in charge of the school feeding program from the Ministry of Education, Innovation, Gender Affairs, and Sustainable Development in St. Lucia. She will be referring to her country's experience. And Miriam has been working within the Ministry of Education for more than 22 years, in fact, and she has been coordinating the National School Feeding Program since 2016. Miriam will have 10 minutes to provide us with her presentation, and she will be giving her presentation in English.
And for accepting to share the experience of St. Lucia with us. Please, I would like to leave you the floor. You will have 10 minutes. Try to keep the presentation within these 10 minutes because we don't have that much time. Thank you. You have the floor, Miriam.
Okay, I would like to, good afternoon all. Thanks for the invitation to represent St. Lucia. And I would like to begin by sharing my screen. It's a PowerPoint presentation as indicated. Oops. 1 minute, 1 minute. Okay, I am Miriam Henfield. I work with the Ministry of Education, and I am from the island of St. Lucia, famous for the pitons, as seen. We are located in the Caribbean islands, the archipelago, close to Barbados, between Martinique and St. Vincent, as seen here in the map, on the map. I just want to reflect on school feeding prior to COVID. And this photo shows students all excited, lined up for the school feeding meal. This activity was during our Journée Creole activity held in October, which celebrates Creole Month. So as you can see, line up no distancing, social distancing. And this was the norm, which we hope to go back to very soon. Students also in classrooms receiving their meals. In 2020, this is just a snapshot of students receiving meals when school resumed in September. The challenges we faced in 2020, from March to April, we were on mandatory lockdown. From May, government workers and some other sectors were able to return to work. And a decision was taken by ministry officials to package the foods and distribute to students where they collected at various schools. So we, from our unit, we purchased the dry foods such as peas, the flour, the rice, sugar, and frozen items, fish and chicken. We also purchased fresh food, local produce, the plantain, the green bananas, pumpkin, and spinach. These items were purchased from local farmers where they receive payment via check, and we packaged everything from our storeroom. The unit has a storeroom, and all items were placed and packaged for distribution. This exercise was tasking, so since cooks were not at school, we requested the services of a few cooks to do the bagging so the various schools and students could receive their packages. However, this distribution lasted for 2 months, May and June. But what we noticed was that when the foods got to the home, the packages, given that there were more people in the household, the food items did not last. So you find that we were back to square one as to how to feed the students during the lockdown. But the meals, the packages received were very appreciated by the parents. And this is also what we did. The goods were purchased by the government of St. Lucia, which finances solely the program. In addition, some schools retain 50% of monies collected, and it was reinvested into the school feeding program. So where we fell short or the goods run out and other parents needed, the schools were able to utilize the funds to prepare packages for the parents. Our regular program, it entails that the meals are prepared at schools by cooks when there is face-to-face learning. Online learning at home, the parents provide the meals. There is no distribution of packages. Last year, September 2020, face-to-face classes resumed. So students were able to receive meals during this time. However, there was a spike in the cases in October and schools were closed. Schools reopened in January 2021, and again, given the spike in cases, it was closed in February. However, during the third term, which runs from April to July, there was face-to-face for this entire period. So students were able to receive meals during this time. Face-to-face run from April until school closed on July 9th. The distributed learning modalities as entailed during the COVID. In 2020, third term, virtual learning was introduced. This was very challenging to both students and teachers, given it was a new concept. Online learning for students with devices and are able to access the internet. In the absence of devices and access to internet, the teachers and principals photocopied the course materials and presented packages from the schools. Ministry of Education provided the support for the principals to prepare these packages. So for the third term, from the K to the secondary and also tertiary level, students were doing the online. These are just photos of local farmers whom we procure the produce from. So here there's a potato farmer who you can see from her garden and washing it and preparing for our pickup. This is another one who does the sweet potatoes and the farm in the background. He also does cucumbers and spinach. We have another farmer who provides us with plantain and the local seasoning chives. Now we move to 2021, what existed during April to July of 2021. Ministry of Education, along with other key stakeholders, Ministry of Health, the government, Prime Minister's Office, mandatory established protocols were designed and adopted by schools, where they were required to sit 6 feet apart, depending on the size, the square footage of the classroom, or 3 feet. Students were required to wear masks at all times, sanitize, and keep the distance. During the lunch break, 4 students sat at a table, and in classroom sitting, students were asked to remain at their desk. There was a staggered lunch period, a lunch break. So students from grades K to 1 ate from 11:30 a.m., grades 2 to 4 from 12, and grades 5 upward. And there was minimum socializing, with the exception of a 15-minute to have the students free up before resuming classes. This here shows the preparation of meals by the cooks, plated for distribution to the classrooms. Students were not allowed to come to the kitchen to receive meals. Individual sitting, these are just photos which shows how the students sat within the classroom. And at the lunch table, they were apart for the lunch. And this is at a special ed school where the students were supervised or assisted in having their meals. The lessons learned from COVID, and we are still learning, is that we are resilient people. We never underestimate the power within. The cooks were able to rise to the occasion in preparing the meals to cater for the staggered lunch periods. Children are very adaptable and were able to adjust to and keep the protocols. The school, from what we are gathering, that the school is the safest environment for the students at present. Last year, we had a situation where in a very impoverished area, the students were being coerced by an individual in the area, and he was providing them with marijuana for food. So they had to come in, smoke the marijuana, sell it in order to get meals. So the ministry intervened and provided food items to the school where the students came in to have a meal instead of remaining at the home. Despite the lockdown, permission was sought from the officers to have the students come in to the school to get the meals. School feeding plays a critical role in the lives of many students and families. And more importantly, the school gardens are pivotal in sustaining the feeding program. So now with the shortage of food, given that the importation is staggered and the food is not as ably sourced, we can rely on the school feeding gardens and the local farmers to cushion that shortfall. COVID-19 provided an opportunity to plan effectively and to plan now. With the reduction in finances and food shortages, government needs to provide more support and incentives to farmers to produce more local foods to feed the population, thereby reducing on our importation bill. And we saw that we in St. Lucia need to create safety net programs for indigents, because with COVID, the numbers of indigents has increased. So we need to create more safety net programs. And at the end of every storm, there is always a rainbow. We will overcome. Stay safe, mask up, and follow the protocols. Thank you very much.
All right, stay safe. Thank you very much, Miriam, for almost on time. Your presentation was very succinct and enlightened. We thank you very much for that. A continuación, quisiera dejar el espacio.
Now, I'd like to leave the floor to Maria Neres, Technical Advisor of the Educational Fund of Brazil. We'd like to thank Sineide for being available and for accepting to share his country's experience with us. I know that Karine spoke about the Brazilian experience, but it's an opportunity for us to delve a little bit deeper thanks to her presentation. Just like Miriam, Sineide, you have 10 minutes for your presentation, and thank you again.
Hey, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the General Coordination of the National Program of School Feeding in Brazil, I salute all of our colleagues and everyone who's with us in this afternoon. It is a challenge to speak in 10 minutes, but I'll try. I had the privilege that the General Coordinator had already started talking about the school feeding programs in general terms, but my presentation will focus on the experience of the municipalities, of one specific municipality, as we call in Brazil. So in Brazil, it's a very large country, so we're looking into a national school feeding program. It is a program that assists all the schools in the countries. We have more than 100,000 schools, and each has specific characteristics. We assist all the students enrolled in the public network of schools, and as it was mentioned, it was a program of universal access. We have a lot of successful experiences during the pandemic and also before the pandemic, so I'm gonna skip the first few slides. And also this part we can skip because it was mentioned by Karine. So very quickly, the federal government has adjusted the laws so that school feeding was offered in the new system. So we were used to work with the school feeding in the school classroom. So when we look at the SFP, the Brazilian SFP, it's a very old program who is older than 60 years of age, but when we compare to the situation of the pandemic, which is an entirely new situation, it's like a new begin in the process of the school feeding process. And we also learn a lot with those who run the program at the grassroots levels. So as the General Coordinator said, we work together with the states and the municipalities. So in order to select a successful experience to share with you, it was a great challenge because there are too many experiences. So we can skip that because it was mentioned by Karine. And this one that the general coordinator mentioned very briefly, FNDE work with the states and municipalities, even in spite of all the challenges that we had, where it was not possible for us to be in the municipality to support in the distribution of the kits. So we did a remote work with these states and municipalities together with the universities in order to think together about alternatives in order to provide school feeding, respecting the law in order to offer quality food for the students and food for all the students, not only the students that are most vulnerable, socially speaking. So even during the pandemic, the program continued to be open to everyone. So recently, we launched a booklet about the school feeding in Brazil during the pandemic. So we did a survey in the first few months, and even in the first few months, we had a very satisfying result where more than 60% of the Brazilian municipalities have supplied school feeding, offered the school feeding to the students, and more than 70% of the states have provided school feeding. So when we're talking about the state provide the school feeding program to all the cities within the state. So we have more than 800 municipalities. So a state that has more than 800 municipalities, they reach all the students within the state. So among these experiences, many of them were successful. So how did we work on that? Given that it was a great challenge, each municipality adjusted the best that they could in order to provide the school feeding programs to their students. Many municipalities adopted the practice of delivered to the homes of the students. Other municipalities have decided to have an escalonated, a staggered distribution of food, sometimes to the parents of the person responsible for the kids. Some other schools have opted for delivering at the school, so each municipality adjusted to their reality. And but they always comply with the law of the SFP. So in this booklet, we have many experiences. So even during the pandemics,
so we have 5 regions in Brazil. Each region has a specificities, and we therefore chose this one because it shows very well what happens in the municipalities very well. This is during the pandemic, so you can see the kits were prepared throughout the period of the pandemic. The food handlers, the cooks received some training as they play a crucial role in the feeding program. So it was very important that these professionals were trained. They would help to prepare the kits. We helped, and we heard you say that there is a lot of fear involved in the entire process. That's why we make sure the protocol of using masks and face shields and gloves is followed. So this municipality worked very well and helped in the handling and the management of the situation locally to prepare the kits at the end users, schools. So the school students, when in the classroom, receive a ready meal, and those who are at home receive the kits, as was said before by Karina. So all students received food, regardless of the fact of whether they are at home or attending school. They always receive food, whether it's a meal at school or a kit at home. What are the different challenges depending on the municipalities that they which manage to face these challenges? They have to follow rules and procedures whereby the pupils who don't stay in the classrooms but have to stay at home, the local management cannot guarantee what happens at home, but they make sure that the kits are delivered. Now, however, as was also said before, we're not sure with these kits that the children still receive the nutritional minimum that is required for them, depending on the families. So we don't know whether all the situation is masked, is controlled. But we work together with the parents, with the community, with the school staffs, so as to have meetings to talk about the importance of school feeding programs, of the sanitary rules to follow. When you go to school, you have to have several masks that you have to change after a specific amount of hours, and the municipalities they adapt to their reality, because you need to know that because of the continental size of Brazil, there are very, very different specificities depending on the region. In small municipalities, for instance, they need to have a counterpart, that's what we call, first, to make sure that the food that is received is a quality diet. So when we see the innovative experience during the pandemic, we notice that when the municipality has a good management, and when it has the funding and it allocates the funding for that purpose, because you can't talk of education without a good feeding program and therefore the good health of the pupils and students. So you can see here some photos that they're quite moving. You can see municipalities where the children are receiving kits. In other municipalities, they're receiving bags of fresh produce. In other municipalities, they go and get the food by boat. In others, it's in storerooms. So you can see that it's very different. Sometimes in some areas, the army comes and helps. So this is why it's so important to have this partnership at all levels, federal, state, and municipality. When you look at the photo and you see the army delivering the food, for us it's quite moving, and we feel a sense of achievement. And you can see that we really work together, and it's nice to see that everybody's happy delivering the kits. So I would like to say it was an honor for me to be able to take part, and I thank my coordinator to be able to participate and make profit of the experience of other countries. I only went over 1 minute.
Thank you for that. You spoke for exactly 10 minutes. And thank you, Miriam, as well. We have just heard 2 excellent presentations, and you have provided us with the opportunity to refer to methods that you adapted to address COVID-19, the various actions you have taken to overcome the challenges you have faced. We've also heard some lessons learned, so on and so forth. Now, I would have to say that as far as the most worthy remarks, or valuable remarks, say I took some notes, and St. Lucia referred to how they were able to provide alternative meals to the children and how they implemented measures that allowed them to continue purchasing products from small family farmers. And I also heard how they had to recruit more cooks and implement new forms of payment for their farmers. How they also had the opportunity to roll out different protocols that made it possible for them to continue serving meals at the schools once they returned to classes. Miriam also referred to the importance of school gardens and the opportunities that have risen during the pandemic to focus on more effective planning. As far as Brazil is concerned, Caire as well as Sineide referred to the importance of adapting our policies to best respond. Law 13985, for example, was key. They also referred to the process to provide the toolkit to the children at home, or the meal kit. Sineide referred to the need to have a shared responsibility here, to involve all the various stakeholders, particularly the parents. They also spoke about the need to reorganize the school nutrition and feeding unit so that they were more agile. Now, I did note the issue of flexibility. All of the members, panel members, refer to the need to be flexible.
Experience of St. Lucia with us. Muchas gracias, Sineide.
And thank you, Sineide, as well. This has been an excellent experience. Second dialogue. Now, as I understand it, we will continue moving forward with the agenda. And once again, thank you for allowing us to chime in. Thank you, John Franson, for moderating this relevant panel. I would like to thank Sineide and Miriam Handel for sharing their experience and for showing the evidence that proves that all of this is possible. Yes, we have faced challenges, but in our experiences, we were able to overcome these, and we have come up with creative solutions to facing these challenges. Luis Bacelar is our next moderator. He is a ABC project assistant, and he will be moderating a Q&A period. So, Luis, we have no more than 20 minutes, okay? Exactly 20 minutes. Please. In order to organize this Q&A period, please allow me to introduce this. We will hear about new experiences. And once again, I would just like to repeat, if we are unable to answer your questions here today, these will be uploaded to the website, okay? The website of the Brazil FAO Collaborative School Feeding Consolidation Program. Thank you, Natla. I would just like to briefly greet you all, ladies and gentlemen, and let you know that this panel will be devoted to Q&A. And as the moderator, allow me to explain how this will work. We have received your questions. We have linked these to the panelists. And once again, thank you so much for participating. And we would like to request that the 4 panelists please be very brief when answering the questions so that we can hear as many questions and answers as possible. So the first question has come to us via YouTube by Latoya Smith from Trinidad and Tobago. And the question is addressed to Karine Santos. So Ms. Karine, how did Brazil mobilize the children's food kits? Did you work through service providers or the government? Who took on this additional responsibility and financial cost of delivering these kits? So the floor is now given to Ms. Karine.
Thank you, Luis. Well, the kits are bought by the local governments, the municipalities or the states, and the distribution to the families is also a responsibility of the local governments. But in order to do the distribution of the kits, they did many partnerships. For instance, partnerships with the social assistance service of the municipality, partnership with the Ministry of Defense. So in the presentation of Sinead, you saw a picture with people from the army doing the distribution of the kits in the northern part of Brazil. So we have a wide variety of realities. We have riverside communities, we have islands, there are many communities, indigenous communities, Maroon communities, so the responsibility of the kids is not of the supplier of the food, but of the local government.
Por su respuesta. Bueno, la segunda pregunta es dirigida a la señora Milena.
Second question for Milena. How could Paraguay involve farmers so that kids are healthier for those students that are at home? Was there any consideration about that? Thank you. That is a very interesting question. In our experience in the delivery of food kits or meals, we did not coordinate the procurement from farmers because the food kit considers only non-perishables. That was a lesson learned in our country where the meals do not consider fruits or vegetables, but the School Feeding Act does consider working in coordination with farmers in a percentage of a minimum of 10% of buying from local farmers. So we are not fulfilling that part of the regulation right now. Thank you for your answer. Third question for Juan Carlos. Juan Carlos, what is the major lesson you learned regarding the supply of school food during the COVID-19? Once again, the quality of the audio of Mr. Martinez is not adequate for interpretation. We cannot hear you. Could you please repeat?
Ahí está escuchando bien.
Sí, ahora mejor.
Okay. Bien, le decía que
Okay, I was saying that in all processes, flexibility was the key. The first one is to make this process flexible. The quality of the audio continues to be poor, unfortunately. Understanding that is just a moment. We already had to think and plan the coming steps, how we were going to go back to school, then how we were going to use alternatives that varied from home to something flexible or non-perishable, how then we went to, how could that be gradual depending on the conditions of each one of the sites? And from the beginning, flexibility was not only applicable to that, but as we heard from Brazil, it's not the same to cater to indigenous populations, and they kept managing the food themselves. So not only did we consider the food kit, but we had the option of providing a bonus to large cities to redeem them. So flexibility, I believe, was the key of our success. It will have to be the key when we go back fully to school attendance. So thank you very much for your answer. Now, fourth question, Marlene Neptune, for Ms. Sineji and Miriam. Could anybody share what type of items were included in the food kits that were delivered to homes, and what was the average cost? Where the quantities in the food, were they thought for the families or only for the children? Sineji, please.
In regards to the food items that were in the kits, the local government should or must, according to the resolution of the National School Feeding Program, comply with the regulation, but according to each age group, there was a kind of food, and for each modality of school attendance, we had kids, for instance, such as the green kit. We have kids with rice, beans, macaroni, oil. So we have several different types, which can vary according to the rules of the local government. And the kit was targeted at the students. So it's kids from all ages, from kids in daycare all the way up to the education of young people and adults. So the kids were targeted at the students only. But we know that when the food gets to the students' house, they prepare the meals, and certainly the whole family will consume the food. But the delivery of the kids were targeted at the schools. The average cost. So we had funds transferred from the federal government and some funds transferred for the state and municipalities. So we have kits costing 30 reais, which is roughly dollars, and others that go all the way up to 60 reais, which is about $15. So it depends on the situation of the local school system. But they should always follow the recommendations of the national resolution of the school feeding program, and the food should always be healthy. So if there is a restriction of if the food is forbidden according to the regulation, it should not be in the kit.
Paso la palabra a señora Miriam para la misma pregunta. Adelante, señora Miriam.
Yes.
Ms. Miriam, same question for you.
Okay, the food items.
Maybe I could
purchased.
repeat the question for you.
I heard the question. Okay, the food items were purchased by the government using the regular school feeding funds. It incorporated the dry goods, the rice, the flour, the sugar, oil, and there was frozen items, chicken, local chicken, fish, filet, and we had corn and mixed veg. We also incorporated the ground provisions, plantain, we had cucumbers, salad, vegetables. These were also packaged and distributed to all students from grades K to secondary school. and the meals were collected by the parents at the schools and prepared at the household. With regards to the cost per family, we have not touched on the breakdown as yet. Well, I have not done it since our focus was more on the feeding of the students. So it was a bulk purchase just to feed the students.
Thank you so much, Miss Miriam, for your brief answer. Ahora, bueno, le pregunto a Najla si tenemos
Now,
espacio.
Najla, is there time for one more question? One more. Thinking of the answer regarding the cost in reales, I believe we were talking about $5 to $10 here in Brazil, considering an average of each dollar, the exchange rate is 6 reales, so from $5 to $10. One last question, please, Luis. This last question is a more general question, is open for the panelists, and it's the following. What are the biggest challenges that your country faces in order to provide school food in the virtual context, hybrid context, and face-to-face context? What have been the solutions that you've found? So the question is on the table for the speakers who would like to address it. Please, the floor is open. Please, go ahead. In the case of Colombia, when the regulation changed in March last year due to COVID, we were really careful about two fundamental criteria in order to allow for continuity. When you work in social aspects, stability is key. And the idea was to find an equivalence for the food kit to what kids used to eat during the same period, but in the school, and simply changing some items by non-perishables. So therefore, from the point of view of nutritional value, they were eating the same, comparing home food with school food. But we also added the fact that the cost had to be equivalent. So they had to think of a basket that would keep the same level of resources that was already designed in the system, because the budget of a state has been already defined. The resources have been already allocated. We didn't have to waste them, but not creating a trauma when going back. Therefore, that gave us a guarantee of stability. The problem is for the technical adaptations that must be made, how operations change, the delivery systems change, or supervision systems must change. So it had to change. And now that we're going back to school, we have to gradually change them again. We have defined these experimental ways of delivery. We're going to have students. The goal is for all school kids to go back to school, but there's a gradual path according to the health conditions and the conditions in the different schools, and therefore the rest is a transition, but not living as something that can be regulated and become fixed and stay longer. Anybody else would like to answer? Please, Karine.
Durante esse período de pandemia e agora no retorno às aulas foi a manutenção da venda dos produtos da agricultura familiar.
One of the greatest challenge we had was the maintenance of the program. The social issue was very strong. And so a lot of farmers were not included in the procurement process. But we we could have one session to talk about how to buy and procure from local farmers, because we had to initiate a linkerage process to make sure that these farmers were engaged and committed to selling their produce, because we had to work with the federal police, the control, sanitation surveillance, and so that they weren't scared and started back selling to the feeding programs locally. Thank you very much, Karine.
I'd like to thank the speakers for your answers, for the time, never enough, of course, but I believe we were able to do this. And I'd like to thank Miriam and Anna for also taking note of the questions. And thank you very much to all of you who have sent your questions. I'd like to offer the floor to Nashla Veloso. Thank you, Luis. Thank you very much for this work of organizing this and also things that should be worked. And also, we'd like to thank the panelists who had the chance of reinforcing some topics that they consider important. Now we are going to close, but I believe we need to do this very quickly, but we will think or summarize everything that we've done during this afternoon. And for that, we will listen to Ms. Paola Barbieri from the Cooperation Agency of Brazil, Paola Oliveira. She is, so we will listen to Paola Barbieri for her to close, and then Karine Santos, and finally I will try to offer you a few final thoughts about the workshop on behalf of FAO. Paola, the floor is yours.
Acredito que chegamos com bastante êxito ao fim de mais importante encontro da Rede de Alimentação Escolar Sustentável, a RAIS, que teve como tema os desafios atuais da alimentação escolar, possibilidades de implementação em distintas modalidades educativas, no marco do Programa de Cooperação Brasil-FAO e do projeto de consolidação de
school feeding programs in Latin America and the Caribbean. On behalf of ABC, I'd like to thank NFNDE, on behalf of Karine Santos and FAO, represented by the coordinator of our project, all of those who have contributed for making this event so successful. And especially Mr. Juan Carlos Martinez from Paraguay, Milena Fernandez from Santa Lucia, Miriam Hanley, and from Brazil, Karine and Sinead. The coordinators as well, Juan France, my colleague, Luis Bacelar, and especially to all of the countries, the school feeding network who have participated today. And I would like to thank the translators who have facilitated our conversation and our understanding. I'm sure that we're gonna have important developments from this event of today. And I also believe that the conclusions of the summit of the food systems of the United Nations that will be carried out on the next 23rd of September in New York will provide important inputs for many reflections in this context. And I also hope that we may make progress in order to strengthen school feeding programs in our region, regardless of the moment, the situation that we are facing, because the right to food is an unnegotiable right. Thank you very much, everyone. Karine, please. Thank you very much, Paola. First of all, I'd like to thank for the coordinator of our project for the Latin American Caribbean, who has been with us for a long time and has such a deep understanding of the program. And our project is very successful in the region because of your commitment. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Brazilian Cooperation Agency, represented by Paola Barbieri, who has helped us greatly in this process, together with the process of the World Network of School Feeding Programs. And I congratulate all the programs who participate in the networks and all of those who are participating today in this virtual meeting. And I would like to say, to talk about our commitment to the sustainable school feeding programs. So I'm very glad and I'm quite sure that from this event, it will have many developments. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you, Karine.
ABC e a FNDE são de verdade parceiros
Thank you
incríveis.
to everyone. The ABC and the other program are incredible contributors, and they are always very much in the forefront, and they devote their blood, sweat, and tears and other resources to make sure that the programs are successful. So thank you so much for your support from the Brazilian institutions. And you are constantly concerned with your own national issues, but as well as food, school feeding programs globally. So thank you so much to all of you who have joined the event. Thank you to those who have provided their support. Thank you to those who have provided us a glimpse into your national context. Thank you to the participants, and thank you to the behind the scenes individuals. We are truly appreciative of all of your support. And allow me to wrap up by saying that I think it is worth reiterating and reaffirming that these seminars, these dialogues, these exchange opportunities are crucial, and they are very inspirational. But even more than that, we know that these have empowered many individuals to take very important decisions in crucial periods of time of our human history. Now, I guess we could say it's similar to a life insurance, a car insurance. You're willing to pay it, but you don't want to have to ever use it. So I think these health crises really should be useful in helping us to improve our lives and adapt and be flexible. And I'm pleased to see that we are all transitioning back to school, and we want to be safe, and we are sure that all of us here today involved in this dialogue and addressing the challenges at the country level, municipal level, department level, etc. We, all of us who are working in the field of school feeding programs, we are fully convinced that these programs have constituted key policies. And we have said on so many different occasions that the right to food, the human right to food, is crucial. And we cannot de-link health, the right to school, the right to health. All of these go hand in hand with the school feeding programs. I agree with all of you in that this should not be a controversial issue. The other social stakeholders also need to realize that there are other issues related to poverty that are having an impact on all of the countries throughout the region. So therefore, having said that, allow me to wrap up with the idea that it's crucial to reaffirm these opportunities for dialogue, and that FAO, Brazilian cooperation actions have really worked toward consolidating policy responses to the needs. And we also need to ensure that there are more opportunities throughout the network so that we can learn from the other post-COVID experiences. And I would like to thank all of the Brazilian participants and all the other country participants and FAO representatives. And we're all here today. We are united and we help each other out because we are part of one big family. And today, of course, we heard from FAO and the need to work on the 4 betters: better quality of life and others. And the school feeding programs are linked therein. So once again, thank you to all of you for providing your experiences, your contributions, referring to your good practices. Thank you for highlighting the challenges and the ways that you have overcome them. And just as a final message, we are not done. The buck does not stop here. We are in the midst of this transition and we need to continue working together on solutions. We know that school feeding programs are part of the welfare, well-being we provide to our citizens. And regardless of the sector we represent, we all know that we need to foster the right of students, their human rights, and the right to quality food, the right to education, the right to nutrition, etc. So thank you so much to all of you once again, and enjoy your evening, enjoy your late afternoon. And your remarks here are very helpful. Please be sure to share these with others, family members, colleagues, technical advisors, etc. And these proceedings have been recorded and they will be available via YouTube, Twitter, via the FAO social media accounts and the ABC social media accounts. So once again, thank you for joining us, and a warm embrace to all of you. Thank you to the interpreters. Thank you to the participants and everyone else. Take care. Congratulations. How about you activate your cameras so that we can